Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of Accomplished Ventures podcast. Keep in mind as you watch this, the only limitations that you're going to run into, whether it's on this side of the fence or the other, are the limitations that are between your two ears. And I want to make sure that this episode and all of the episodes that we put out really give you that confidence. And so today's episode, I am stoked. I'm excited. This is a guy who's got a deep story. Daniel, my man, how are we?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So good to be here. Thank you for having me on. Really excited for the conversation today. Really hope we get to give back.
That's the ticket, man. And that's the biggest thing. You and I were talking offline. Really, is like, you've shared for going on a decade some of the deep and dark and dreary places that life has drug you. And I always say it's always more therapeutic and cathartic for me going back into prison than whatever they think I'm giving to them.
Totally, exactly. It's like just being in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and being a service is obviously the foundation. And sponsoring guys, working with other people is it does a lot more for me sitting there for the hour than it probably does for the other person. And, that's what service work is all about. I like to say being of service is the most selfless, selfish act possible, right? Because of how much it fills me up and benefits me, even though I'm doing something for somebody else. So, yeah, I love it.
That's good. I love that. I used to, a lot of these guys, inside they'd have buzzwords and they'd say, oh, I feel depressed or sad or whatever the case might be. And so I'd hit them and I'd say, look, on the left side, I want you to write down all of the thoughts that you had that led you to this dark place. And then at night, I want you to call me or I want you to call somebody that you love and I want to read them out loud. And oftentimes you'll realize how selfish some of those thoughts are.
Yep, 100%, 100%. And especially too, what a lot of people don't realize that I've found over the years doing the work is writing is so lethargic, right? I mean, not lethargic, therapeutic. I
Yeah.
apologize. It's so therapeutic to just take a pen on paper and just write. And again, also when you do something like that and you're writing things down and then you go talk to another person, that's why we do the steps, right? And you're able to take the power out of those words so much by just writing them down and then going and saying them out loud to another person. And it makes such a big difference. To be able to remove the power from those thoughts and that mindset.
That's great that you touch on that. I was in four prisons 2 weekends ago, and whenever they throw out a question to me, I always pull out their verbiage. I really critique them on their words. And I'm like, do you believe that you're going to or you are going to? Right? And the language that we tell ourselves. I read this conversation this morning. It's from Jordan Peterson, and he talked about having tough conversations. And he said, when you're racing, like in your mind, like I can't sleep, or I've got a thought while I'm driving, and you're having this dialogue in your head, like it's with somebody else. Maybe it's an argument, maybe it's a tough conversation with your spouse. He says your body doesn't know whether you're having that conversation or not. And so
Mhm.
you've put yourself in this heightened sense of awareness that can lead to all these other negative implications instead of just having the conversation.
Mhm. Exactly. It's wild, right? Like you again, you get into the self-development world, you read all these books and like a very common theme is the thing between our two ears is the most powerful tool in the universe. And it really is, and it works both ways, right? It's kind of like that double-edged sword where yeah, it's the most powerful tool in the universe if you use it in the right way, but it can also be the most destructive tool in the universe if you don't know how to use it the right way.
Man, that's good. On that, I'm going to hit you with a question. Let's talk about you speak about it a lot. It's on your Instagram headline, right? What is the red pill?
Yeah, great question. So, if some people have been out there and they've watched the movie The Matrix with Keanu Reeves, this is really where it comes from, right? Because he was given a choice in that first movie in the series where you can either take a blue pill or a red pill. And the blue pill just puts you back in, the reality you were living in, kind of that the rat race, the hamster wheel of, hey, everything's cushy and okay, you have your job, you just wake up every day and go through the motions and you're not going to have to really deal with anything difficult, right? You're not going to have to confront like actual reality and make tough decisions and go through hard things. And that's okay if that's the life you want to and choose to live. But then there's the other side of it, which is taking the red pill. And that's really waking up and seeing reality for what it actually is and really shifting from having one set of beliefs to another set of beliefs. And seeing like the illusion that's going on, which we can get deeper into like what the illusion is and who's creating it. But taking that red pill is saying basically taking your destiny into your own hands, for me at least in my experience, and understanding that, listen, I'm going to shape my own reality, but it's all on me at the end of the day.
I love that. Accountability, that last piece of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's such a tough thing. I talk with constantly. I had somebody tell me the other day, someone who's close to me, love your opinion on this. They said, why do you continue to say that it's all your fault? And I said, you know what? Because it allows me not to have any more negative dialogue. Because if something goes wrong in one of my companies, I have two choices. I can either say it's my fault and innately come up with an immediate solution, or I can run down this rabbit trail of why 4 or 5 or 6 layers away from me screwed up.
Yep. That's so good. That's the best way to look at it. And early on in my self-development journey, I stumbled onto Jocko Willing, right? And Jocko kind of, it's crazy. I read his book, Extreme Ownership, which is exactly what this is. Ownership, accountability, same thing. And that really like hit home for me because throughout my life, I grew up, most people would say privilege, right? My dad was also a career Wall Street guy, financial services, did very well. My mom's side of the family, her father did very well. So I had every opportunity in life put in front of me. And obviously I squandered some, didn't squander others, but a lot of my life, especially early on, I always spent like if it didn't work out for me, I would immediately search for who else's fault it could have been, right? Because then it wasn't my fault. Then I didn't have to be accountable to like my actions as to why something didn't work out, why the opportunity fell through. What was that guy's fault? So, nothing's on me. Um, but that extreme ownership piece from Jocko has been really at the forefront of my journey, especially the last like 10 years of really looking at it, just like you said. And there's something else in his book that he talks about is there's no bad teams, only bad leaders.
Hmm.
And that, right, that just aligns with it because when you look at a business, or you have a team, you're managing people, people are performing under you, and something happens, first off, it's always somehow your fault, just like you said, right? Because the reason that that person didn't perform up to their potential or didn't get something done is because of something my leadership is not allowing them to see or understand. So I have to go back to the drawing board and understand, okay, like where did I go wrong? How do we fix it? Like you said, let's go find a solution, and also be like radically honest with that situation and say, okay, I'm accepting what went on. It was no one else's fault except mine, even if it technically was, you
Was,
can
yeah.
always find, right? Like, even if I had nothing to do with that major error, guess what? It happened under my watch and somebody on my team. So I have to go now take ownership of that, and figure out the best way forward and the best solution. So just like you said, that accountability factor, I mean, that is the best way to operate. And it immediately gets rid of that victim mentality that you can fall into.
Man, and that's so tough. It's so tough. I talk with a lot of these guys behind bars all the time. Like, it's so easy to say, like, my co-defendant, fill in the blank, my ex shouldn't have, fill in the blank, the judge, I mean, there's just a whole myriad of excuses that we can come up with, but it doesn't serve you if you never want to come back to this place.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Like they have a saying in AA where it's basically like, listen, your best thinking is what got you in this room. Like that's what happened. Like
Oh,
nobody else is, because again, okay, I got
that's
a D,
good.
right? Right? Isn't that good? Like you can look at it and say, like you said, well, you know, I was driving the car, my buddy went in and robbed a bank. Is like you were hanging out with the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Like that's on you, right? Like you were in a situation you should have never been in, but you're like, but I didn't do anything. I was just driving a car, right? Same with a DUI. Well, I was out with everybody and I drank the least amount. So I was the one being responsible. It's like, no, you got behind a wheel under the influence. You could have called a taxi. You could have called, now we have Uber and Lyft and the whole
Right.
thing. You were the one that made the wrong decision, that in your mind you rationalized it as this is the right decision. But when you look at it, when you take a step back and look at it on a bigger scale, is like, yeah, I still was at fault. Like, where did I go wrong? And then also too, to play into that, just moving a few steps further, and again, this is all the work from Alcoholics Anonymous, which plays into every area of life. That's the craziest part about, the program of AA. And is, okay, now that I acknowledge that I did the wrong thing, right? So taking ownership, now how do I go clean up the wreckage that I created, even though it might be someone else's fault, like whether it's a client of a business, somebody else screwed something up, like I got to go make it right now, even though it might not have been my fault. So that's like even moving forward further. And that's where you're able to really take away that, not just the victim mentality, but where it's like, I am in true power of like my destiny and the outcome of this situation.
That's the key right there. Like the true destiny is taking accountability for all, just like you said, like, okay, after I've taken accountability, now I'm going to go fix it, even though I could find 3 or 4 reasons why I shouldn't have to.
Yep, exactly.
Man, that's good. That's incredible. A lot of the questions from the individuals inside and people watching this everywhere, revolves around entrepreneurship or starting a business. And I think sometimes social media has glamorized how easy business is.
Yep.
And I think the scars on your back and my back would tell a different tale.
Hmm.
But one of the quotes that I want you to speak about that you posted, you said, action separates the dreamers from the achievers. The courage to start and the will to persist create success.
Yeah, I love this quote because again, growing up the way I did, and a lot of things came easy to me in life, right? Like school was easy. I was an athlete. Sports were easy. I got really good at a few sports, and had a lot of success with that. I didn't have to study for 8 hours a day to get straight A's. It kind of just like I showed up and it happened, right? Putting a little extra effort here and there. So, for me is really the action part was always kind of innate for me. Like,
Got
yeah,
it.
like let's get going, right? Like let's move,
Got it.
let's go. But
Yeah.
that is also something that has gotten harder for me as more failures have
Mm.
stacked up, right? So yeah, it might be easy when you're 12, when like the world, there's so much innocence and you don't know any better, or 15 or 16, but by the time, I'm 34 now, by the time you hit 30 and life's beaten you in the face so many times, it's like the action part gets a lot more difficult because you're
Yeah.
like, man, getting kicked in the face is really not that enjoyable. Like I'd prefer to not have to go through that again, right?
Yes.
Uh, but that is also the key to starting. But once you starting is like the small piece of the equation, right?
Yeah.
Now at the beginning, it's definitely harder. You're more thinking about like, well, what if, who's gonna laugh at me? Who's gonna make fun of me? Who's gonna say I'm an idiot? Who's gonna tell me I'm wrong? The whole thing. So getting over that hump is like, okay, let's just get rolling, and making, like, separating it down into much smaller action steps rather than this big monster of an idea where, like, yes, let's go dream of this goal and this future, but then we have to reverse engineer it into little small steps, so then it's so much easier to, again, just get started. Let's go take action. Okay, I'm going to wake up and do this. I'm going to wake up the next day and do this, etc. But over the journey, the the persistence is what is required, right? Because no matter what happens, you're gonna get kicked in the face 100 times before any sort of success happens. Like, I don't even, not even a remotely like twinkle of success, you're gonna get beat down a lot before that ever happens, right? And then obviously as your success gets bigger, those beat downs also get bigger, right? The highs and the lows
Yeah.
are so much greater the further along you get. And again, like, I'm not Elon Musk, right? You're not Elon Musk. Like, I don't even know what it's like at those levels, right?
Right.
Um, but persisting through, it's literally the equation for success is, if you can get up one more time than you get knocked down, that is the equation. Like, that's it. Like, you just have to keep going no matter what's happening, whether, you can't make payroll the next week, you got to sell your car to do it. You're gonna like, whatever it is,
Speaking
whatever,
from experience.
whatever crazy stuff it is, right?
Right.
Um, you just got to keep pushing through and keep going, and that is the equation for success in everything in life,
Yeah.
relationships, business, whether you look at sports, it doesn't matter. It's like, I had a bad game. Can I get up and try and go forget about it, right? It's in the past. We got to move on. Let's analyze what happened and how we got to fix things. Let's go find a solution, and keep going.
It's such good advice. I was listening to the Modern Wisdom podcast
Mhm.
earlier today, and he said that, it's like a top 50 podcast in the world, right? Like
Yep.
it's massive. And he said that one of his like mentors, closest friends, like who's a billionaire, bought him this plaque, and the plaque was the first like five uh podcasts that he ever put out, and it was the chart all the way until his like 10 million subscriber. And he said when he looked back, he was literally like, nobody's watching, everybody hates me, like the whole like dialogue that you tell yourself. He said, and then he was sitting down with their CFO, and he said, "Do you realize that after you had gone on Rogan twice, like the pinnacle of what most people would ascribe to in the podcast world, right? He was like, I've made it. I've done it all. Like, forget about it. Like, I'm crushing it." He said, 85% of your subscribers came over the last 12 months, which
Hmm.
was 3 years after you ever did Rogan.
Hmm.
And he said
Yep.
his mind was like blown. He's like, I did more revenue in December 2023 than I did in like the first 8 years of my podcast career. And so it's that like constant kick in the face that you talk about, that constant pressure on the fire hydrant of life, that all of a sudden it's like people see these results, these massive results, and then they hit you with the, oh, that must be nice.
Yep. Must be nice. Aren't you lucky,
You
right?
had
And
it easy.
I even looked at people earlier on in life and thought the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Because no one is seeing the daily habits, the daily grind, and how many years it took. And I think, like you said, social media is such a farce in this way, is everyone looks like an overnight success.
Yeah.
Everybody. And 80% of the people that look like they're successful really actually aren't
Are
successful.
not.
A
Yep.
total show. And we know that. Obviously, real business owners, and you could do the math, right?
Yep.
The math doesn't make sense. So
Math
um,
is not mathing.
the math is not mathing, right? And but at the same time, that's why I like to go look at guys like, Chris Williamson of Modern Wisdom, and even Rogan. I love, there's a picture on the internet. You can go look at the first podcast episode Rogan did, and it is him, and I forget who it's with. It's I think some like random guy at the time, but this is like near Fear Factor days, right?
Yeah.
Like way back in the day.
Yeah, when he
And
had hair.
yeah, exactly. He still had hair, and they're just sitting in his living room, and they have an old like Windows computer, like a video camera, and they're just like both huddled in next to each other on two chairs. And like, that's episode one, right? And again, the cool part also about the internet and all the access we have with technology is, we think about like 8 years for that success, right? In the grand scheme, if you look back in history, like the exponential growth that someone's able to have in 8 years now versus like how long it actually took Walmart to become Walmart, or like anything in the past where there was really no technology to be levered,
Yeah.
like 8 years really isn't that long of a time to be wildly successful, you know? So that's
It's
the cool part about technology that we get today.
it's no, 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 you're definitely right. It's definitely like it's never been easier to start a business in today's world, but it's also never been easier not to do anything.
That's also true, right? And that's a crazy way to look at it. Also, is because everyone's leading you to believe, and you see all these people, hey, you can write something on Canva and sell it for $28 and sell it 18,000 times a month and be a millionaire, right? It's
Yes,
like,
easily.
yeah, and it's like, yeah, but what else goes into being able to do that, right? So again, it is never easier to start a business, but like you said, I also think it's never been harder because you're also competing on a global scale in every industry now.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I'm the best in the Northwest of the United States. I got my best home goods store, right? Like Home Depot did, or any of these other older brands. There is a positive and an equally big negative on
Mhm.
the other side now,
It's
definitely.
so true. And access. It's interesting. We've my wife and I have three little girls, and our 9-year-old just coming into that idea about like global access and being able to conversate as we travel around the world. And she's like, "Oh, I can use your phone to have conversations with these people in their language and to pay our restaurant bill in their currency and all this kind of cool access, right? But at the same time, it comes with the downside of the access, which is like Johnny Pants 587 always on Twitter telling guys like you and I how we're idiots.
Right.
And
Right.
for somebody who is, maybe doesn't have the thick skin like you and I, who hasn't done the 9 years of sobriety, who hasn't done the 2 years in prison and developed thick skin through both of those really, really difficult trials. How do you deal with, and speaking to the audience here, how do they deal with that negative self-talk, that
Mm,
negative self-worth, that's coming at you constantly? You don't have enough likes, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too white, you're too black, you're too rich, you're too like you're just you should just die.
yep.
How do
Man,
you
I
deal with that? Especially as a guy, you've got your own podcast, you've got your own tribe of people, you're influencing folks. How do you
yep.
deal with all the self-worth bull crap that happens?
Yeah, man, I love this topic and this question because, you know, there's a reason I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's because I was trying to fill a God-sized hole with everything else besides God. And, again, higher power, whatever you want to say, right? And that's self-worth right there. Self-worth, self-confidence is I'm just comfortable in my own skin, no matter what. And it's taken a long time, and I'm not perfect. There's some days I wake up and I got that negative self-talk going on in my head, first thing, the mind's going crazy. But I've also developed a routine in order to get me to a good place on top of it. So first
Really?
and foremost is, figuring out, I think being really authentic in who you are is one of the best strategies to be able to deal with the negativity from external negativity from other people, right? Because when you're truly authentically yourself, you stop caring what everybody else thinks or says about you.
Yeah.
If you're wearing all these different masks, trying to impress this person, trying to impress that person, trying to be somebody you're not, that's when your skin becomes like non-existent, right? Like
Yeah.
every little thing is so detrimental to your mindset because it's almost like they're right in a way, because they're saying stuff and you're like, oh yeah, but I'm not being authentic. I am a
Right.
liar. I am this, I am that, right? So whether they say it or not, they can just call you an idiot, but that idea will go in your mind and compound and just take you into another dimension of negative self-talk. So I think authenticity is really like one of the biggest things that at least has helped me over the years. And even with your family, right? Like my parents, like I used to try to be somebody I thought they wanted me to be. And that definitely wore down my self-confidence. And it's exhausting to live that way too. That's the other thing. Like you want to wake up fulfilled with energy, be authentic, right? Because the other way, I'm waking up every day like, oh, I like, oh my gosh, I can't get out of bed. Let's just watch Netflix. It's so much easier. So authenticity is the biggest thing. And then um also too, do what feels good to you in a way like health and wellness for me, and not just physical, but also mental and emotional health and wellness. So again, like I pray in the morning, I pray at night, to a higher power of my understanding, right? Like I'm not a religious person,
Yeah.
but um I first thing in the morning, I pop up, do my prayer, get dressed, run to the gym, right? Work out first thing every morning. And I think that I always tell people, they're like, man, I wake up at 4:40 every single morning, get to the gym 5:15, get my workout in before I get in, start grinding at the office. And I'm like, my day cannot start shitty if
Yeah.
I do that first. Like it's impossible, right? Because I get all the dopamine going,
Yep.
the endorphins, everything. And then it's also a hard thing. Like I go move weight around, I go push myself. And when you're doing really hard physical strenuous things first thing in the morning, a lot of the other stuff throughout the day, like isn't really that difficult. Where if I don't do that in the morning, as soon as I see the email, if there's a negative, something
Oh
didn't
yeah.
break right, you're just, oh my God, it go into a tailspin. So, I think that's super important. And gratitude lists for me are really big. Where, again, when I'm realizing all the things, like how incredible my life is, like it was so difficult for me to be that grateful of just waking up today, right? And like you said, whether you're behind bars, behind prison walls, out in the open, you got to wake up today. So many
Yeah.
people didn't get that chance,
Yeah.
and um, I think that's really important to help with just the negativity that comes from the outside. Because the other thing too is never try or never believe everyone's going to like you. 50% of people are going to love you and 50% of people are going to just despise you, right? Like a prime example is look at who's running for presidency
Yeah.
right now, right?
So
There's literally half the country hates him and half the country loves him. Like the numbers are right there, right?
and
So
89% of the half have never met either of them.
exactly,
Like face to face, right? Like we're
exactly.
just taking sound bites of the people that are the places or
Yep.
the things that we follow and forming this like radical opinion. It's amazing.
Yep, yep. Gotta love technology. You gotta love social media. But I think that's super important too, to just remember all the time is like, listen, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. As long as you're being authentic and you're not, stealing and cheating and robbing, doing bad on other people, then
Yeah.
it's okay that some people are just like not going to align with what you stand for. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I didn't so when I go inside, I tell a lot of the guys and gals this. I don't walk in and talk about like Narcotics Anonymous
Mm.
because I've never done it. And so
Yeah.
to your point of authenticity, it's not something that I want to try to coach them or guide them in because it just feels rough to me. Like I've never had that desire, to tie off my arm and stick a needle in it. And so
Yep.
how dare I speak to it? And so if you don't mind, I'm going to go off topic here and
Mm.
use your sobriety to be able to talk to these folks because this is something I don't speak on a lot. And so I'm not the expert and I recognize that. Somebody battling that, regardless of where they lay their head at night in this country, listening to it, walk them through, life is good for you now, but it wasn't always that way. Or maybe it was, maybe it was hidden. Like, how do you get yourself to a decade on the other side of the bottle, bro? Real talk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things we share in meetings all the time, right? Like,
Okay.
what was it like, what happened, and what it's like now. And um, I was like high functioning with it for a long time. My thing was with my family, hey, things will be taken care of, show up, be an athlete, do good in sports, get good grades, and like you don't got to worry about much anything else. And So I was able to just do my thing for a while. Now, when I look back and look at those habits, even though I was more like a weekend warrior, I was still showing up to class, etc., like my habits and the amount of things I consumed were very alcoholic in nature or addict in nature, right? It was, I was drinking to oblivion. I was, putting things up my nose until they were no longer there, right? Like it wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to do a little bit here. So, again, I held it together for a long time until I didn't, right? Like now, most people will always reach a point to where, like, you know, I it's not that I burned my life to the ground. On the outside, things looked okay still, right? Like I wasn't homeless, I wasn't in prison, I had a roof over my head, I had a car to drive, right? Like, but on the inside, I was so broken and
Mm,
so lost that it was, I think the last few months, I was just trying to do as much as I could every day to not wake up the next day, right? Because I was just like, there's no point anymore. Um, so really what happens is, and I tried to quit on my own, like dozens of times. That's the other thing too, right? Like no human power could or would, help you stop drinking. And I did it all. I tried everything. I would flush drugs, I would throw alcohol away, and then like all of a sudden 20 minutes later the dealer would show up at my house and I'm like, not again. Like it happened again. No. And crying my eyes out every day because I looked at my life and there was this upward trajectory, and all of a sudden I was like, what the hell happened? Like 3 years later, now I'm like a loser, right? And I'm a firm believer in most alcoholics and drug addicts are not innately bad people, right? They have an illness that causes them to do bad things, right? But they're not terrible people. And when you take away the drugs and alcohol, it's like great, okay, but like I haven't dealt with the root cause. And the root cause is I'm spiritually bankrupt. I'm discontented. I just like need help. I need medicine because the drugs and alcohol were the medicine, right? A lot of people look at it and say, well, that was my problem. No, it was the medicine to my problem. Now I got to go find the real medicine. So I went to rehab, and I'd never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous before. No one in my family is an alcoholic or a drug addict that I know of, right? By blood. Um, so in rehab, they brought us into, an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I just sat there and listened to people that looked differently than me, who were a different age, different socioeconomic background. Some had been locked up, some had never been locked up, but they all said they drank and used for the same reason that I did, right? So it was a big thing for me was day one, I immediately heard the similarities and not the differences. And they said, listen, there's a better way of life. You never have to drink or use again if you don't want to. The door is always open. We will help you. You just get in the middle, ask for help, be honest, and, work this simple 12-step program. And over the years, that's what I did, right? I got into the rooms of AA. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps. I took commitments at meetings, which is basically just a way to stay accountable. You
yeah.
have to show up at this meeting. You get to be of service, right? That's the other thing. I was a very selfish person before I got sober, and you learn how to be of service. And for me, that's like the juice I was always chasing, right? That was the high I was really always chasing. So now when I'm of service, I'm like, man, this is it. Like, this is it, right? So that's like the cure for the ailment. But again, finding a higher power of my understanding, something that I could turn my life over to.
Mm,
If something was shit was hitting the fan and I didn't know what to do, guess what? I didn't have to do it on my own.
there you
I
go.
had either A, group of people, or B, something bigger than myself that I can just say, someone else has got this, someone else is with me. And, you know, over the years, it's just continuously still doing those habits, right? Still showing up to meetings, still working the steps, still sponsoring guys, giving back to what was so freely given to me, and making sure that I am in the middle of the pack, and I have this group of people around me that not only support me when I need it, but I also am there to support them. And one day at a time, I wake up now and I'm like, man, coming up on 9 years, can't believe it in one way, right? It's like, wow, sometimes it feels like yesterday that I was, sitting in my car getting high, wondering like who's gonna roll up on me. And like I've been in handcuffs, but I never was in prison. Something bigger than me was watching out for me, and I think that's something that I don't think everybody is an alcoholic or a drug addict. I think some people do it in a heavy way, and maybe that's the reason they end up in a bad situation, but they necessarily don't have like the mental illness of alcoholism. I wholeheartedly know like I do, and I belong in AA, but it's it's a program of living that everyone can utilize to benefit themselves, right? It's being of service, having a spiritual connection to something bigger than yourself, doing the right thing, always telling the truth, taking ownership, cleaning up your side of the street, making amends, all these things that, I've taken into every other area of my life. But yeah, I mean that's been my experience. But the only way I stay sober every day is because of the 12 steps, nothing else for me.
And you think that is probably what brings you all the peace in life that I think so many people are compensating for. You talked about a God-sized hole, right? Like I try to tell these guys all the time when I'm in the room with them, like if you just walk out and put your cards on the table, if you just, and I can't speak to the meeting, you can correct me. If you just walk into the meeting and put all your cards on the table, the amount of peace that you're going to experience by just telling the truth, I can't describe it.
It's unbelievable the weight that you feel just fall off of you, right? And that's going back to that authenticity. Like honesty and authenticity are one and the same, right? How can I be my authentic self if I'm not being totally honest about myself and what's going on? And it's one of those things like when I walk into the meeting and I'm like stressed out, shit's going sideways, right? Things are not going my way. I'm like this, right? I'm so like just grabbing it, holding on for dear life. And I walk into one of those rooms and like my shoulders just fall, my breath gets a little longer and deeper because and I think this is a big part of it too, is I have somewhere where I can share my truth and be honest about what's going on. But B is I know that I am not going to get judged for what comes out of my mouth. And I think especially too, like you said about, so many of us high performers have like childhood trauma, a lot of shame, right? A lot of guilt. And when you can be in a room, whether it's with only men, right? Because they have the same sex meetings where it's like only men, and then they also have the mixed meetings. But when you can be totally honest and not have any judgment, and most likely someone has gone through the same thing you've gone through, and they can come up to you and say, listen, I have experience with this, I'm here for you, I'm here to help. Like that is just the ultimate like calmness that comes over you. And again, peace is one of the things where you can't buy peace, but it's one of the most valuable assets, in life.
And the beautiful part about what you're doing is, you're perfectly positioned to help that person that you once were.
Oh, love that quote. Love that quote. Ed Milet. Oh man. Yeah. And the crazy part about Ed, right? Like his dad was a
Yeah.
sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he takes a lot of that knowledge and applies it to like the work he does. And
Mhm.
uh, but yeah, you are, and that's another thing, just to bring it back to kind of like that the imposter syndrome or the negative self-talk, low
Yes.
self-confidence is always remembering you are the most qualified to help the person you once were, right? So all those guys that you go talk to behind bars, guys and girls, when they get out, guess what? They can immediately turn around and say, I can help somebody else. There is somebody I can help. And that, I mean, that's like the beauty of life to me.
100%. No, I love that. Um, the entrepreneur journey, what's it what's it take
Mm.
in today's world? A lot of these guys have an idea. A lot of these gals have an idea. What's it take?
Yeah, I think it takes what they have an idea of, like, times 1,000, right? Like 1,000x what you think it takes. That's what it actually takes.
Yeah.
Um, I think the biggest thing for me is just grit, like
Yeah.
grit. I think that, and I mean, there's a fantastic book called Grit. Anybody that ever hears about it should definitely go read it. Angela Duckworth, amazing book. Um, but again, like we talked about in the beginning, the persistence, like grit and persistence, where no matter what's going on, you got to show up and just like keep going. And you got to be able to be a shining example of what the right thing to do is on a daily
Yeah.
basis, right? Like
Yep.
it's almost like being an athlete. To be a good winner, you got to be a good loser too, right? Like when you get into trouble, when things go sideways on you, you got to be able to like lose like a gentleman, right? And say, "Yep, this didn't go my way." Going back to the
Yep.
accountability and ownership is um this one's on me.
Yep.
No one is coming to save me.
So true.
What do I have to do to get back on track? And I think that's the other part is really understanding that you can have anything you want in this life and in this world, but no one is going to give it to you on a silver platter. Like you legitimately have to go get it yourself. Now, resourcefulness, right? So if you're able to be resourceful, you seek people out, you seek mentors, you cold call 1,000 companies before someone says yes, right? Um, I think resourcefulness, because you'll get it if you really ask for it enough times. Like someone's going to give it to you, whether it's the business from a client, a referral, a deal, like someone's going to give it to you. You just have to, again, figure out how to get in the right door in
Yeah.
order to make that happen.
It's so true. Where do these folks find you? A lot of people listening to this have access to social media, and you're going to get a lot of conversation, I'm sure, with especially with your journey around sobriety. So,
Yeah.
where does everybody get to find you?
Love that. I can't wait. Instagram, you can look at my podcast, The Sovereign Entrepreneur. That's the podcast. We have a ton of great episodes. Like I said, we're gonna have you on very soon. Um,
Where'd
you
that
can
start from, by the way?
yeah, great question. So I've been wanting to do a podcast for a number of years now, and really just like haven't known kind of like what platform, like do I do it myself, do I do it with somebody else, like what does the back end look like, the whole thing. And I've just been, you know, kind of blinders on, focused on the 10 other things that are going on in my life at any one time. But my partner, this guy Rob, great kid, super smart, super driven, we met at the gym, right? We both work out 5 o'clock in the morning, and you know, we were just talking for a few months, and I was talking with him. He's an entrepreneur. He has his own, you know, company that he does kind of consulting for doctors and medical practitioners. He came from private equity as well, right? Financial services. And one day I was just like, dude, I really want to do a podcast. Like, do you want to do it with me? Like, we have great conversations every morning. Like, why don't we just have these conversations, but record them and put them out there? Because, hey, some of this content might be total garbage and nobody likes it, but I think some of the conversations are actually pretty good. And, you know, maybe it helps somebody. And also, too, just kind of like documenting our journey and
Yeah.
going back to you were qualified to help the person
Yep.
you once were, right? Is like, what would it had helped me? And again, we're obviously we started our journeys earlier, so podcasts weren't much of a thing when that journey started. Now obviously everyone and their sister has one. But yeah, we just started. I said, screw it, if this sucks and fails, whatever. I gave it a try. And then he really played a part. He's a great operator, right? So like systems, processes. He's like super tech forward. Talk about AI. This kid knows everything. So we just started recording, and obviously we're both entrepreneurs, and um, you know, we've just been having people on, different subject matter experts, other entrepreneurs. I mean, we're just scratching the surface in my eyes, but
Love it.
yeah, it was something that I've wanted to do and just kind of found the right person to do it with. And we created the platform and, we've got up and going.
Love it. I love it. I cut
Yeah.
you off. I apologize, but yeah, sovereign entrepreneur. It'll be fun. We should get some of your episodes behind prison walls as well.
Let's do it. I'd love to do that. And again, I'll have to come out, speak with you in those places. I mean, I would love to do things like that. And that's what attracted me to you most, I think. Because for everyone listening, like I've heard Travis on a few different podcast episodes that I listen to, right? Jimmy Rex, another great one. And a couple other ones you've been on. And I just reached out to you and I was like, your story is so inspiring. Like, thank you for doing what you're doing. And I think that's another big piece of entrepreneurship now is building a network of like-minded people. And again, being really genuine and not just showing up and being like, hey, can I get this, this, and this? Of just like, let's connect on a genuine level because you're actually speaking to me. Like, I feel your message. It's really resonating. And just acknowledging people like, hey, that's so good. Like you are killing it. Keep doing what you're doing, right? And then things come out of that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's really great, and I think again, like I said, what you're doing is incredible. I applaud everything you're doing.
Means the
So
world, man. It really does. Every time I get to go back, it means the world. The messages that we get, this will be seen on 700,000, 1,400 and change, different jails, prisons, and institutions nationwide. And I can't even tell you just the stories and the impact and the you saved my life, because of so and so that you had on, and the people that have connected outside of it, and the people that who are incarcerated now, who maybe knew your family, or like
yeah,
you'll make some of these so incredible connections, because you were vulnerable enough and authentic enough and to share your story. And I told it on Jimmy Rex, and I tell it every opportunity I get. And since you opened the door, I'll continue there. But you know, you talk about Jesus being crucified, and you talk about him coming back after the resurrection, and nobody, his followers at least, didn't think that it was him because of what they had saw him go through. And the way that they did know that it was him was he said, come and touch, see the nail prints, come and touch me. It's such an interesting conversation to really dive into that. Like, you really get to know people when you really embrace them. First of
mhm,
all, the bigger conversation around that is, that's an individual that I try to be like on a daily basis, that you obviously try to be like on a daily basis. And so if he gathered his tribe by showing his scars, I don't know why we try to hide ours.
is that crazy?
Golly, man, like I scream that from the tops of every prison tier that I can get into. I had a young man tell me a story a couple weeks ago, and he was so, bro, he was so hell bent on, I heard that I can get this removed off of Google. And I was like, first of all, it's a lie. Like, you're not beating the Google. Like,
Yeah,
I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but there are people out there that will sell you snake oil and all sorts of crap and tell you they can do things, but Google will not just erase it because you're good looking and you paid $49. But I said, but second of all, most importantly to me, why don't you own it? Like, you're not
yep,
in here for for a crime that I wouldn't have you at my dinner table for, right?
right,
Like, this is stupidity at best. This is
right.
ignorant choices at best. Like, so why don't you just own it? Why don't you walk out? Why don't you write a letter to your daughter and say, "Hey, I hung around with people who thought less of me and made me think less of myself and didn't want me to come home to you. I'm no longer hanging around with those people, thinking like those people, being like those people because I do want to come home to you." If you become the person that you want to be, she's going to have a desire to be around those people. And you don't have to erase anything off of Google.
Yep. It's almost better that you don't, because then it's
Mm,
like, here's the proof of the scars, right? Like, look how far I've come.
yeah.
And we see it a lot, not just in your case, but like, look at how many people on social media who are big time speakers now who all were in prison, some life sentences, somehow got out on parole, right? Miracle
Damon,
work.
yep.
Um, what is that guy's name? Damon
Damon
West.
West, yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable how to be a coffee bean. Um, but that is just
The adversity.
just, and like you said, resurrection, right? Like
Yeah.
this gives all the scars that give you the evidence that say, hey, if this guy can go from there to there, why can't I too? You know? So it's very powerful stuff.
What do you got for these folks as we sign off?
Yeah, listen, keep listening to Travis. I think the most important part that'll really help you, because one thing I didn't touch on is, and we kind of mentioned it earlier, is you can be in prison whether you're behind prison walls or not. I've been in a prison for many years of my own making, right? And um, you have to work just as hard whether you're incarcerated or in that mental state outside the walls. It's almost worse sometimes where you're like, I have all this freedom at my disposal, but I am so locked up in my head that I can't enjoy any of it, right? And I think the most important part is learn how to be grateful on a daily basis. Throw yourself into figuring out how to change your habits, how to change your mindset, right? How to build strong fortitude, how to develop grit, and how to be of service, because when you do something for somebody else, like the universe sees it all, right? If you give, it'll come back to you tenfold, right? So don't worry about, hey, how am I going to make money the day I get out of prison, right? Educate yourself so you have all these tools, but then go out and start helping the people that you once were, right? Get around a good group of people. If you got to just cut everybody out of your life that was in it before because they're dragging you down, that's a sacrifice you have to be willing to make to be able to grow into this new version of yourself, right? You got to let the old version die to get to the new version. But I think anybody in this world, no matter what your background is, no matter where you come from, what you've been through, you literally can do anything that you want. You literally can, especially being in this country, right? Of all countries, we have the most opportunity out of anywhere on this planet. So mindset is the number one predictor of success. I've read it in hundreds of books, right? It's all about mindset. And if you leverage your brain as the tool that it is in a positive way, you'll never be in prison another day of your life. So, again, this was an absolute pleasure, Travis. I mean, I'm so happy you asked me to do this. This was one of the best hours of my life for sure. And to all the people that is your audience, right? Like just keep going and it'll work out.
If people want to reach out to you when they're out, is there a good email address or a website or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say DM me on my personal Instagram. I mean, it's public, so feel free to message me. It's at Dan DANN DiBiase DIBIASE, and I'll respond to anything. We can connect there. I'll give them my information. We can connect further, but that's definitely the best place to get at me. And I'm more than happy to reach out. Please reach out.
Good, man. I appreciate it. It's been an honor. Hopefully we'll go in and touch some lives with this one.
Definitely.
Right on, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.